Hey everyone, welcome to our stream here. This is going to be the DePaul University first esports career chats, and today I'm joined with Kevin Fair, the founder and CEO of iPlayGames. Kevin, how are you doing?
Get it right, Lex. You gotta get it right, man. I'm doing really good, man. I'm excited to be here, man. Having a lot of fun, and as always, man, it's an honor and a pleasure to be able to be of service to you guys at DePaul in the esports program.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. For everyone watching, we're currently streaming live on Twitch and Facebook. You're able to leave a comment in any of those places and we'll be able to see them. So if you have any questions for me or Kevin, feel free to drop them there and we'll try to get to them as soon as we can. So I think we're good to pretty much get started. Kevin, just introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about how you got into esports.
So I got into esports like literally as esports was being thought of in a lot of ways. I started a company after I graduated from undergrad, so just as a really great, intro to everybody, I got a really great base by getting my undergraduate degree in computer science, and worked a lot of my very first jobs for groups that were using my abilities to code and program, which I was not top of my class at. I just worked really hard and kind of kept at it on the job market kind of thing. But what I found myself really kind of doing through those experiences was asking more about the things that I was even more passionate about, right? I enjoy creating things, which is probably why I went into coding, plus I had a lot of input from my teachers and adults beforehand about that. But then I started thinking about what I did as a hobby and how passionate I was about gameplay. And I know for some people, it might be a little hard to imagine a time before esports and arcade bars and Evolution Championship Series and LCS and things like that. But I was basically talking about an idea that most people thought was foreign. Most people really didn't believe me when I said there were going to be full venues dedicated and surrounded around the activity of video games. And I started tournaments before they were considered esports or that term was even thought of. I started a lot of tournaments for people who did not have spaces to kind of create and compete in that way. And so one of the very first things I did was I bootstrapped enough money to rent a venue. I started to fix and work on my own equipment, and we ran a Street Fighter 4 tournament on release back in February of 2009. So to answer the question, that is how I got into esports.
Awesome. And that's really interesting how you got in so early. And it's cool how you kind of transitioned your computer science programming past into, following like your hobby and what you're passionate about. I really like that. Today, do you still code at all? Or?
Barely. It's funny because no, it's, one of the things I always tell people is that while I was running my business, so over the course of that 10 years, I started in a place that was super intense on, hey, we've got work to do today. The next day we were working easily 60, 70-hour weeks at a point in time. And what I started to kind of realize was that a lot of my creativity was really kind of being stifled in a lot of ways. And so to me, I said, well, great, I'm going to move away from doing this. And I'm going to go and start my own thing, but I still needed to pay the bills, right? So I always try to remind the people that get excited about it. I try to remind them that I didn't go straight into having my own business and everything was awesome. I worked as a field technician for 5 years while I started. So the first 5 to 6 years of my business, I literally worked a job and was fulfilling all of the type of events that you guys know and see about iPlayGames. So in the early days of anime conventions, sci-fi conventions, we were fulfilling these orders of getting people their PlayStations and their televisions, as you guys know us for on the equipment rental side. But then we were also running tournaments while I had a job. So if you could imagine this, let me give you a picture, Alex. I had a job Monday through Friday that I would leave on Friday at 5 p.m. and drive in excess of 6 or 7 hours to a location, drop off this equipment, run tournaments until Sunday evening, repackage this equipment, then drive 6 to 7 hours back to Chicago, unload said equipment. And guess what? Some of my coworkers, I had to like drop the bomb on them. I said, some days, guys, I went from unloading that equipment to walking right into the door over here.
Oh my God.
So my best day to go to sleep was on Monday. Um, so on Monday, I would catch up on a ton of sleep. I would come home about 6 or 7 o'clock and then sleep until 6 or 7 o'clock the next day. And so, yeah, I during that time period, which I wouldn't trade for anything, I was a field technician. So I was fixing people's computers at the same time. So here I am. Before there were all these really great tools to help you build websites, I was still using my coding experience to build the small little online platforms that we had at the time while I was fixing people's computers during the daytime and then running tournaments over the course of the weekend. So yeah, I got to put a lot of that to work. I took a lot of my technical background and expertise and paid myself as a person so that I could take care of bills and rent and all of those great things. And also I was invested in every step of the way, which is the other important thing I try to remind people, which is, most of us think about investments from like a venture capitalist kind of thing where it's like, well, did you get $100,000? And it was like, no, but guess what? I was investing in myself the entire time. Every little $500,000 here or there is, what helped kind of build the company. And so I'm always super proud of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's clear that like the hard work there has paid off for sure. And that's awesome to hear. Kind of pivoting a little bit. When was that time that you realized that you kind of wanted to enter esports? I know you talked about how you kind of transitioned into it and how your friends kind of thought you were crazy at the time saying that these venues are going to be full. So when was that time that you thought, wow, this could like really have a future?
Well, I always felt that it did. So, I formally started my career in 2009 as an entrepreneur that was running video game events. But this is who I was in high school. In high school, I used to bring my GameCube to school, and I literally was setting up tournaments in high school, on the televisions that we had available to us. So I would go to AV and I would snag a television more times than not, for reasons that I wasn't supposed to. But I knew the risk involved because I knew the reward was great. My friends were going to enjoy the time that we kind of organized gaming around that. And so in high school, I knew then that I was holding these competitions that were fun amongst friends, but they didn't feel official, right? You know what I mean? There was no officialness to them. Nintendo wasn't saying, "Hey, you're doing a really great thing. We want to step in and help you." A lot like how groups like Riot step in and say, "Hey, if you want to host a League of Legends tournament, we will help you and we will find a way to bring some validity to what you are doing." So in some ways, I guess what I was able to recognize without being a business major or anything like that was I recognized that there was a void in a space where there was a need, right? So in high school, I said, there's really a void kind of happening where people enjoy video games and they competitively, play amongst their friends, but there's no way to like validate that they're the best at this. It's just, you're the best of us. And so I kind of kept my finger on the pulse as a 23-year-old that said, hey, you liked gaming when you were in high school and you still like it and you're getting ready to graduate from undergrad. I can bet that there's a generation of people just like you that would love to see competitions in this. And that's probably where I really started to kind of say, I want to be a part of this as it's forming. And then you got to give shots out to guys that have been running tournaments since the mid 2000s. They gave space and weight for that as well. So
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really cool. It's awesome to hear like you sneaking out of high school playing games. I mean, it's just always a good time.
Oh, don't get it wrong, because my mother might see this. Mom, I didn't leave high school. I brought the televisions into classrooms while I was still there, so I never left. I didn't play hooky.
On the rules.
No, right. I need everybody to know because I'm not getting in trouble when people see the VOD of this later on. I was still in school the entire time. And guess what? I think the one thing that I always look back and laugh at is that my teachers at the time, I think they saw that we were a part of the International Baccalaureate program. I'm not sure if that still runs today. And I think some of my teachers recognized that we were good students and something like this didn't hurt our overall, education.
Right.
It was a fun thing that kind of broke up the monotony of being in class all the time. And, I think that was their way of of secretly rewarding us, hey, I let them just go ahead and do it. Fine.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes complete sense. That's great to hear. Kind of going off that, so in high school and when you were in college later on, did any of those education experiences kind of give you like a stepping ground to enter esports, or at the time where you kind of, seeking all these opportunities out yourself for the most part?
No, honestly, it just wasn't really even heard of at the time. At the time, I don't think the understanding around how video games unites people. We had a lot of barriers to break around the stigmas of people who enjoyed video games were reclusive and were always going to be socially awkward. And even though I think there's room for those personalities in gaming, people who just are more introverted, which isn't a problem. I think that once again, it was very much a typecasting. People thought that, well, gaming is this reclusive activity. There's no way that people who are in gaming are building things. I think we are still talking about today. The conversations are still going about how gaming leads students to wanting to get more active in STEM careers or STEAM careers realistically. I think we were looking at the time, most people probably have a hard time, going back to this, but graphic design jobs were all the rave, but they were just becoming this thing that everyone was able to get their hands on. Most people couldn't conceive that you could be teaching elementary and high school students graphic design and 3D animation as it, pertains to video games.
Right.
So a lot of these things weren't really thought of in that way. And I think you learned about things in gaming through something else, right? So I learned about coding, and so I learned about, basically, algorithmic and logarithmic logic through my coding classes, which taught me about how and why games run the way they run. And
Right.
so I just needed to make that connection on my own. There was not a whole lot to help me back in 2002 to say, hey, I want a career in gaming, let alone an event planner in gaming. People people had never heard of anything like that, let alone like, oh, you're telling me you're going to run an event and the event is solely going to be about video games? That just probably would have blown people's mind. They had never heard anything like that.
Absolutely. And it's really impressive how much the collegiate scene just with esports in general has developed. I mean, I remember when I started at DePaul, it was kind of like a crazy thing that we had esports, and now it's almost like a college standard that colleges have esports. So it's really cool how that's like emerging like that. So what's one thing when you entered esports that you wish you had known?
I think that one of the things that if I look back now about how a lot of this really kind of came to life is that the diversity of games and game styles really probably took off in a way that I didn't think it would, or at least I hadn't predicted it at this time, right? So at the time, it was really easy to point to games like, well, there's Halo, and there's Street Fighter, and there's Smash Brothers, and then of course on PC there's Quake. Most of us didn't know how to look at a world where there were going to be these new kind of games that were going to come through and be, hey, this is something people want to compete in really big numbers. You could have shown me something like a Sakar, Rocket League years ago, and I would have said, what is this?
Right.
And you're telling me people want to play this against each other? We didn't really think about the creativity that games could have in a competitive sense, and then say, man, this is going to be like a really huge landscape. So we focused on the things that we thought people had available to them. And now when I look at it, I really would have loved to, kind of carve a path out in some of these games that, honestly, didn't have a competitive scene at first, but most people have a hard time imagining this, but DDR used to have Dance Dance Revolution, the games you guys see in arcade, had a huge competitive scene that has never been streamed or filmed in a major kind of way. A lot of groups do grassroots things, but man, if I would have thought about the appeal that something like Dance Dance Revolution has with people in different age groups, different backgrounds, both men and women truly enjoy that game. We could have had a lot of representation with that game, and think about how perfect it would have been to talk about esports with a game that's so widely diverse in that way.
Right.
We missed the boat on that, but you can't get them all. Can't get them all.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think moving forward, it looks like a lot more games are becoming competitive. I mean, we're starting to see like older games being speed run competitively. So games like Mario 64 and these, who would have assumed that would ever be competitive?
Exactly. You know what I mean? I mean, I would have always thought, hey, this would be cool to show people, but to think that people consistently were going after these records over and over again in a way that is, once again, incredibly entertaining to crowds and competitive. Yeah, no, once again, another one we missed the boat on.
Absolutely. Cool. So now kind of to like switch gears, I wanted to talk about, the current events with COVID-19. How do you think this has affected the esports industry? Just like in the last 4 or 5 months, would you say?
Well, I think the one thing that probably has become really obvious is that large events are probably going to go away here for, what most of us probably consider the foreseeable future, right? And I think the misfortune is that without those types of things, what we considered good sponsorships beforehand is probably going to just change a little bit. Events where groups were able to get large exposure, immediate customer feedback, things like that are going to probably change. But then here's the thing. I think, part of a business's job is to pivot. I think part of what I consider our responsibility as I play games is creating good pivots that work around things like, hey, this live venue is no longer available to us. But we very much get to act as a technical resource for a lot of groups that do not know how these things are run virtually to begin with, and how virtual learning, conferencing, all of those types of things happen in real ways. Um, I'm working with the IGDA later on to put on something about diversity. And then right after that, we're going to have an Injustice 2 tournament. And we're going to host that completely online. And we have thought of ways to include people from different spaces and different reaches by doing things like learning sessions and things like that and reaching out. And it's just basically said, hey, the good time we were going out to places before and having, we can replace that, or we can find a good alternative by doing this. This is something we can easily try. And guess what? For most of us, this has been the way we've stayed connected to one another. We haven't been able to see our friends or hang out, or our coworkers for that matter. But these fun activities are really the way that we have been able to stay connected and kind of continue to move forward.
I agree with that completely. I mean, just in like my experience with quarantine, if it wasn't for being able to game and hop on Discord with friends, I think I would have lost my mind by now. It's a great like escape to forget everything for a little bit. I completely get that. So kind of like branching off that, and you can discuss COVID if you want, or just in general, what kind of developments do you see, next 5, 10 years when we're at like 2030 for esports?
Well, I think one of the things you can look at right now is you can take a look at the groups that are getting involved as sponsors. One of the games that I really enjoyed playing for a little while, and they had some character buffs and changes they needed to make, was Overwatch. I loved Overwatch, and I think you guys are participating or running some Overwatch tournaments up right there.
We do. Yeah, we have an excellent Overwatch team, and we're also doing a few tournaments over the summer. One tomorrow, actually.
Nice. No, yeah. And Overwatch was something I was playing for a period of time, 5 to 6 nights a week, easy. And really enjoyed the game. But aside from that, you could take a look at the groups that were looking to get involved in the Overwatch League at that time, which was going to be on, I think they had moved their streaming over to YouTube, but also was working out a deal with ESPN, which meant they had some stuff going on with ABC. So guess what? They were getting ready to put probably all of the cereal sponsors in line, so General Mills and all of those good groups. Pretty sure that there was apparel and things like that coming along. And I think here's one of the things that I consistently try to remind people, and why I think Overwatch is such a great case example. For the faults that it may have had going forward gameplay wise, you could take a look at a game that did a really great job at doing, I usually say, 2 to 3 good things. First of all, they introduced the game to everyone in a way that said, this is a first-person shooter, but this is not all the other first-person shooters. One of the first characters they promoted was Tracer. They put Tracer in front of the game and said, hey, this is going to be different than what you're normally used to. They gave us utility characters, people like May, even though she's a little bit of a cheese at this point, but they gave you characters that said, hey, this is going to be objective based. We're going to take the focus off of this. And what we're trying to do is make something that's fun for people to spectate with one key ingredient. And the key ingredient for Overwatch was, at the time, is that these matches can change hands because you can switch heroes and do different things. Now, bring all of that up to answer your question in a long-winded way by saying they devised a game that they wanted to make a spectator sport out of. And I think one of the things that we'll see as we move forward more and more in the scene of esports specifically is games and game developers are going to try to create games that spectators can very much enjoy. The characters were easily identifiable in Overwatch. You could tell who was who. And Call of Duty, they all just look like guys. They just look like guys holding on to machine guns, whereas each character not only had their own look, they had their own sayings, they had their own weapons that were unique to them. So all of these things allowed you as a spectator to have a better idea of what was going on. Now, granted, still might be a little fast and a whole lot going on at one time for spectators, but I think they really tried their best at the onset of it to say, we're going to create a competitive first-person shooter that's spectator and fan friendly, because our idea is that we're going to get people to be invested in watching this league with some pros that you know, and hopefully we start to draw out people that weren't pros at first-person shooters beforehand. And I think if I would say through 2030, we're going to see more games with that type of approach, more developers with that idea in mind, which is, if we're going to make a game, we need to make it so that people at home can follow it, and it has to have exciting mechanisms that allow people to feel like there's always a fighting chance. I don't know how much you get into fighting games, but Capcom's been trying it forever. People complain about stuff like X Factor, but that's what it was there for. Mm-hmm. It was there to create a fighting chance so that you as a spectator have those exciting blow up moments that make you happy to watch it kind of play out. And, each one of the groups that I feel like has said we're going to try to be in esports, their developers are thinking about it with those tools in mind. So, yeah, that if I had to say something, man, fan friendly games should become a part of everything. Right. Come 2030, hopefully in the next 10 years.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And kind of, I'm not sure your familiarity with it, but would you relate that kind of towards just Valorant? Because just when you said, how Overwatch has these characters that give a fighting chance, I immediately thought of Valorant in the sense that compared to like CSGO, where you just will get out-aimed, Valorant, you can still win with these extra power-ups. You can still have these clutch situations if you have an ult. Is that kind of like the same relationship you're looking for?
No, I agree big time. I think that's a very astute point. I think the concept in mind is to try to achieve the simplicity that you get with the CSGO. Once again, CSGO is super easy to kind of watch. Most of the characters are on the ground still, so there's no flying in the air and things that you have to follow and watch as a spectator. But there are also elements of it that, once again, for the gamer, because once again, you still got to please that audience.
Right.
You have to make the gamer feel like they not only have a fighting chance, but they also get to do something that's cool too, right? And I think every game tries to achieve that. They try to say, what's the thing that you do in this that's cool, right? And for some games, it happens to be precision aiming with things like headshots. With other, games, it's, achieving a really high combo or something like that. So they were like, here's a tool that's going to make gamers feel good about it, and maybe spectators are going to get excited when they see it. And I think you're right. I think you're right. That's something Valorant definitely is going for. If you look at some of their campaigns up front, they did the same thing too. They said, we're going to make sure that we, appropriately represent a diverse audience of gamers that could be a part of this, but can also enjoy and appreciate what they're seeing on screen.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm interested in seeing how that game ends up developing kind of long term, seeing if it's able to like stick in the meta. And then just kind of like one of the last few questions I have for you is any piece of advice you could give to DePaul students or kind of just any college student that's looking to enter the gaming or esports industry, either after graduation or maybe starting now?
No, I always tell everyone what I did. The biggest lesson I got from gaming, which I try to give to each one of my students in all of our workshops and classes. IPG does esports workshops for middle schoolers and high schoolers, is gaming teaches you to think outside of the box. I can very fondly remember, cracking game secrets without Nintendo Power magazines and how rewarding it was when I thought outside of the box. And then I could see the fruit of my labor through getting better and practicing. And guess what? This is how that translates to real life. Gaming as a competitive industry is very much in its infancy. And while there's a ton of groups that are doing awesome things in it that, have revolutionized the space as a whole, the other thing I remind people is that there's still so much left to fix and solve. And so your ability to think outside of the box, create your own solutions is really what it's all about. I think what I tell people is that when I found my passion in video games, my passion drove me to problem solve more, and it took me past my mistakes, it took me past the hiccups when we found obstacles. Because I was passionate about gaming, I was always excited about figuring out these problems, and being an astute problem solver is really, what I have to thank for so much of what's going right for us.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. It's definitely a really good answer. And I think, especially like thinking outside the box, I think just in my experience, it's very, very rewarding. And it really did help like me mentally, I think, especially in high school,
Yeah.
develop a lot of skills through gaming, despite a lot of like stereotypes, if that makes sense. Cool. Well, that's pretty much all the questions. I think now I kind of want to just give you a little bit, talk about I play games and see how we can get involved with that and a little bit of information.
All right, let me see if I can get this doohickey to work, as the old people used to say. No, so funny enough, in my background, guys, I have my website up, and this is the easiest way to get in contact with us with any of your questions. Obviously, we have been the turnkey solution for a number of different groups through our event staffing, our rentals, and then, of course, we have been the technical director for a good portion of groups' online virtual conferencing and experiences, which has also led us to working on things that allow us to do online classes, and we've been able to do online tournaments for groups that haven't been able to meet. So here's the funny thing. The pandemic has really kind of allowed us to grow our wings in a space where most groups thought, hey, well, we'll always have youth sports, right? Well, we've been doing for Chicago Kicks United, which is a football club here based in Chicago, which also has a foundation that provides youth league soccer. We have been able to provide FIFA 20 tournaments for them as a means of not only staying in contact with their students, with their kids, but B, it's also served as a way for them to talk about the game of soccer from a strategic standpoint. And then lastly, I think most importantly is that this is a way where they have been able to talk about their program. So imagine streams we've been able to have with them where we have been able to have the gameplay going, but we've been able to build in commentators that are their program directors, and they've been able to do and say things that help grow what the program is. It's also a way for them to kind of create a jumping board for their next thing. And if I'm thinking of this correct, let me pull this guy up next. I've got a slideshow of some of the events they've been doing pre and post COVID. Actually, I think I have you guys up next. There it is. Boom.
There I am.
Guys. Yep. I was going to say, there you are. I figured I would be able to find you. And so we've been able to take people's experience right from like, hey, I'm like really early into esports, and say like, here's a group that it has implemented in the past 2 years. They are actively participating. We have been able to work with them in a consultant fashion and bring them to events like C2E2 and help grow their foot and their footprint in these spaces, and talk more about how esports helps aids things in video games. And I mean, honestly, it's a thing that I have a lot of fun doing. So, first of all, that's the biggest joy out of it for me, is that I get to have a good time doing these things. But in the long run, we're really creating a brand new space where the pandemic has, really kind of cut a lot of the ways that we keep in contact with our youth short. And this is a tool that I think is going to be more than just an alternative. at some point, this is going to be a way where you are finding solutions to common problems, and you're able to connect with students in a way that we weren't able to connect beforehand. And so, no, I always encourage people, come right here to the site, ipgnation.com, and you guys are able to contact us right through this contact form. Or if you guys got it directly right here, you can go to contact@ipgstaff.org, and you guys will be able to reach us there with any of your questions about esports workshops, about live events, or virtual conferencing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, everyone definitely check out IPG. It's a great organization, and what they're doing is really incredible. And that's pretty much everything I have. Kevin, thank you so much for answering these questions and sticking around for our first career chat. I really appreciate it. And just before we leave off, we're just going to leave you guys with one more video from our C2E2 with IPG for you to check out. But yeah, thank you so much, Kevin. Really appreciate it.
Definitely, man. It was a pleasure, Alex.
Great. Thanks.